In this exercise, I'm going to show you how to erase some holes in your foliage with a higher degree of control than you could achieve using the eraser tool on its own. I've gone ahead and saved my changes as bigredfoliage.ai. It's found inside the 10 Pathfinder folder. And what I propose that we do is paint in some perspective holes, some hole shapes using the blob brush. And then we'll turn around and finesse those hole shapes using the eraser tool. And then we'll actually apply those holes to the foliage using the -front command. So go ahead and grab the blob brush. And notice right now, at least in my case, that the fill is set to none and the stroke is red. So while I've been using the blob brush, Illustrator went ahead and switched my fill and stroke attributes so the stroke is red and the blob brush goes ahead and reads that stroke information. So if I were to paint anything into the foliage like so, the foliage would go ahead and absorb that brush stroke. Don't want that. So I'll go ahead and change that stroke color to CMYK cyan. That'll work out just fine. Any other color is actually going to work. But cyan should show up nicely. And then I'll paint in some brush strokes like so. Now, you might look at these brush strokes and say, of course, good golly, Deke, these don't look any better. In fact, they look significantly worse than those holes you created using the eraser tool in the previous exercise, which is true. Of course, I don't deny that. However, I am going to go back and make them look better. I am going to finesse these holes, or at least these perspective holes, these hole wannabes, using the eraser tool. That's pretty good. Just establish a few holes here and there, maybe just flop a few other guys in there as well. If I go too far with these, I can always cover them up later. All right, now I will switch over to the eraser tool, and I will go about erasing into some of these hole shapes like so. First of all, notice that my eraser brushstroke is smaller than it looked like it was going to be when I was painting in the first place. I'll just show you what I mean. Painting this big old brushstroke right here, and as soon as I release, it actually shrinks like so. So that's something you have to bear in mind when you're working with the eraser tool. Also, by the way, I've erased into all of the unlocked objects because nothing is selected inside of my illustration. The eraser tool is erasing into everything. So obviously it's not what I want, so I'll press Control-Z a couple of times in a row. That would be Command-Z a couple times on the Mac. Then I would press and hold the Control key in order to get my last used arrow tool. That would be the Command key on the Mac. And I'm fortunate in that that happens to be the black arrow tool, which is what I want. So I'll go ahead and Control-click or Command-click on one of these new blue shapes. Then I'll go up to the Control panel, to this icon right there, select Similar Objects, and I'll click the down pointing arrowhead, and I'll choose All. And that will go ahead and match all of the attributes associated with this little cyan shape. And that will select all of my new cyan blob brushstrokes. All right, now I'm going to erase into them. And I'm going to do so with a larger brush. I'm increasing the size of my brush by pressing the right bracket key a few times. I still have the eraser tool selected. I'm going to erase into this brushstroke like so. And notice now I erase just the cyan brushstroke. I do not affect the red foliage. Now, I may not affect it as much as I thought I would. So in some cases, I'm going to have to erase multiple times, but that's okay. Just go ahead and do so. Just erase these guys down to whatever size that you think they should be. And really what I'm going for is some kind of unusual shapes. I don't want everything to be kind of blobby. It shouldn't look like a vague brushstroke that was drawn with a clumsy tool. All right, so I'll go ahead and erase this guy down a little more like so. I'll erase into this one as well. Once I get these brushstrokes refined the way that I want them, then I'll go ahead and add to the selection, I'll add the foliage in the background by shift-clicking on it with a black arrow tool. And then I'll switch over to my Pathfinder panel, and I'll click on -front. So again, when you click on -front, you're subtracting the many forward shapes from the one rear shape. All right, so I'll go ahead and click on that icon, and that goes ahead and turns those cyan shapes into holes. Now, let's say you had it the other way around, just for the sake of argument. Let's say the holes were in the background for whatever reason. So I'll go ahead and press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that modification. And I'm going to take this compound path right there, which is the large foliage shape right now, and I'm going to drag it up my stack here inside the Layers panel. When you're trying to invoke an auto scroll like this, you sometimes have to scrub at the top of the panel. All right, so I've managed to scroll to the top of the stack. I'll go ahead and drop that compound path, the red path, into place. Now let's say what you want to do is you want to subtract the many rear shapes from the one and only one front shape in the selection. Then you would click on this guy. minus back. I just want you to see that there is a minus back Pathfinder operation. So minus front is going to subtract the forward shapes. Minus back is going to subtract the rear shapes. In both cases, you're only subtracting from one base shape, either way at the back in the case of minus front or way at the front in the case of minus back. All right, so I'll go ahead and click on that option. Does exactly the same thing. I end up getting these holes right there. So whether you subtract the forward objects or the rear objects, you're going to achieve the same effect. In the next exercise, I'll show you how to add some random edges to the main body of our foliage.